Hello, today's talk is on whether the US, particularly, and the EU are empires. Well, there's an exceptional view of American history that the Americans will not follow the same development as European empires. But something pointed out by Carol Quigley in Tragedy and Hope was whether America would become a universal empire. Now, this could be said to have happened for about 15 years after the end of the Second World War. America had nearly 50% of the world's GDP. It's had for 4 years after the war the monopoly on the bomb, and it had global reach all over the world. But after that 15 years, with the rise of West Germany and Japan, you then had a situation where the United States basically returned back to having about 30% of the world's GDP. Now, today, after the Cold War, we went through a brief time where America was described by a French foreign minister as a hyperpower. That is something beyond a superpower, where you had a unipolar moment where American power was so far ahead of everyone else's that Europeans could not compete in economic, military or scientific terms. And this could be seen as between the Clinton era and the early Bush years, but of course then 9/11 happened. After 9/11 came this period of anxiety. Now this was the point at which America had to decide whether it would become what is called the Universal Empire. Now, Universal Empire is the point also at which there is internal fragmentation. Carol Quigley put this out in a formula, saying that once an empire had become universal, there would have a decline in birth rate at home. More importantly than that, the amount of men of fighting age would decline, and there would be a process happening along the point at which there would be a major military defeat. Now, the Roman Empire went through several of these moments, and then eventually collapsed due to inflation, and because it limited its amount of its military power. For instance, with the Roman Republic, when it had two biggest challenges, that was from Carthage and from the Teutons. Rome could field 700,000 citizen soldiers. Then Rome developed a professional army, and their army thus stayed at around 130,000 men. Then this started to degrade as inflation bit into the soldiers' pay and also the facilities for training them, and then they started to use mercenary troops. Now there is an apocalyptic strain through American culture that believes that this could be the point at which America is going to fall. Now, realistically, that is not going to happen. American military power will long into the mid-century continue to outpace all other military powers, and maybe even economically it will still be the second biggest economic power after the EU. Nial Ferguson contends that the EU won't even catch up economically, but since the Gulf War and the massive deficit that the Americans have built up for themselves because of their relationship with the Chinese taking on American debt through the bond market, this is what he called China America, where the Chinese were savers and the Americans were spending. And of course, all through the Clinton era, this spending frenzy went on in America, all fueled on borrowing from China. And so this is the symbiotic relationship between China and America, the special relationship. Now, is there a special relationship between England and America any longer? This is a critical view. Well, not so much. Our relationship with the United States may now be the same as the Dutch with the United States, that we are a reliable military ally through NATO. But the EU, or Jose Barroso, has already said that it is, in a sense, an empire. It has the dimensions of an empire, but it is not forced. Now, there's evidence to suggest that the Israeli lobby in America has a tremendous influence, and you can also say the same for the Germans in the EU. They have a tremendous influence. They pay the most out and they receive the least in money in. Now, the French are the biggest beneficiaries from the EU because of the common agricultural policy. It is arguable that if German efficiency replaced French bureaucracy, then the EU would work a lot better, and it would, if you get rid of the common agricultural policy, it will work a lot better as well. But is the EU an empire? Well, the EU is not an international organisation, nor is it just a club of voluntary members. It is heading towards becoming a United States of Europe. It has its own currency, it has its own defence minister, it has its own foreign minister, it has its own army and its own, when coalescing fleets together, its own navy. It has territorial interests throughout Africa and in the old colonial countries. Now, this is the same for England. England has its Anglophone relationships with India, with the United States, with Canada, with Australia, but it's also part of the EU, and it's also a partner with Germany. Most of our exports go to Germany, and Germany is the biggest exporter in the world. All those exports that China makes, all those things that we see in our supermarkets saying made in China, those were all made with German machine tools. So the EU is being the world's largest exporter because Germany is in it, and also with the largest financial centre because London is in it. Could be said to be an empire, but it's not, and it's not in a sense acting as an empire. An empire could be seen as the extension of power beyond territorial limits of the state. Now, a successful empire could be seen as the early United States. With the Louisiana Purchase, Thomas Jefferson purchased land to double the size of the United States, and then this continued right across the continent to what he called an empire of liberty. But this empire of liberty changed itself into a nation state, and that is the key point to empire. Why did the British Empire succeed and has succeeded and more power with far less resources than the American Empire? Because it exported millions and millions of its people, and those people went to states such as Canada and Australia and turned them into nation states. So you had then a community of Anglo-Saxon nation states that came out of the empire, and you can say an Anglophone state of India, which has a dual Hindi and English speaking. So what will the future be between the EU and the US? Well, that will have to be for another talk. Thank you for watching.